They told us it was for our safety. That was the sentence repeated on every flyer, every broadcast, every stiff-lipped announcement made by men in identical gray suits who never gave their names. Our town, Red Hollow, was being relocated, effective immediately. No debates, no appeals, no delays. Red Hollow wasn't famous, it wasn't rich, it wasn't even particularly old. Just a quiet town tucked between low hills and pine forests, the kind of place people pass through without noticing. I had lived there my entire life. My parents were buried there. My memories were nailed into its streets, its schools, its grocery store that still smelled like dust and apples. They said the land was no longer safe. They never explained why. At first, people laughed it off. Government nonsense, a drill, a zoning issue. But when military trucks rolled in at dawn and set up barricades around the town limits, no one laughed anymore. Soldiers went door to door with clipboards and calm voices, instructing us to pack only essentials, clothing for 1 week, personal documents, no pets larger than a carry-on suitcase. That last rule made Mrs. Ketterson cry. She'd had her German Shepherd longer than she'd had her husband. I remember standing in my living room holding my mother's old photograph album when a soldier gently shook his head and told me paper items were unnecessary. I put it back on the shelf, knowing I would never see it again. They loaded us onto buses with blacked-out windows. Phones were taken for signal interference reasons. Anyone who argued was escorted away, and they never came back to the bus. We didn't know where they were taken, and no one asked twice. The ride lasted hours, maybe longer. Without windows or phones, time became slippery. Children slept. Adults whispered. Somewhere behind us, Red Hollow vanished. When the bus finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a town that looked almost like ours, but not quite. The sign at the entrance read, New Hollow Residential Zone C. The houses were familiar in shape, but wrong in detail. Roofs angled too sharply, windows placed slightly too high, lawns trimmed perfectly, without weeds, without variation. Everything looked recently built, but intentionally aged, like a movie set designed to feel lived in, without actually being lived in. Men in white coats and badges waited for us, smiling too much. They handed each family a folder and a key. "This is your new home," one of them said to me, pointing toward a beige house at the end of Maple Loop. Maple Loop had not existed in Red Hollow. None of the streets here matched our old town's layout, though they used the same names. Inside the folder was a map of New Hollow, a residency ID card with my photo already printed on it, and a document titled Community Living Guidelines. I didn't read it right away. I wish I had. The first night passed quietly. Too quietly. No dogs barking, no insects, no wind. The silence pressed against the walls like a held breath. I lay awake on the unfamiliar mattress, listening to the hum of something underground, a low vibration that never stopped. The next morning, a bell rang throughout the town at exactly 7 a.m. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, vibrating inside my chest. When I stepped outside, everyone else was already out, standing on their porches, confused and blinking. At the center of the loop, a digital screen had lit up overnight. "Welcome, New Hollow residents. Please review your rules." That was the first time someone said the word rules. Later that day, a man named Coordinator Hale gathered us in the community hall. He spoke gently, like a teacher addressing nervous children. "New Hollow is a controlled environment," he said. "To ensure your safety and well-being, there are certain guidelines you must follow. These rules are not optional." Someone asked what would happen if we broke them. Hale smiled, and for the first time, his eyes didn't match his mouth. "Correction will occur," he said. We were told to read the rules carefully and keep the document with us at all times. Updated rules would be announced via the central screen or the bell system. No one was allowed to leave town limits. The forest surrounding New Hollow was strictly off limits. When I got home, I finally opened the document. There were 12 rules on the first page. Rule 1, all residents must be indoors between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. without exception. Rule 2, do not acknowledge voices coming from outside after curfew. Rule 3, if someone knocks on your door after 9 p.m., do not answer, even if you recognize the voice. I stopped reading. That night, I tested the curfew without meaning to. I lost track of time unpacking and realized it was 9:03 when the lights outside shut off all at once. Street lamps, porch lights, everything. Darkness swallowed the town. I froze near my window, heart pounding, when I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. Slow, deliberate. They stopped in front of my house. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, polite, 3 taps. "Evan," a voice called softly. It's me. It was my sister's voice. My sister had died 5 years earlier. I backed away from the door, covering my mouth to keep from screaming. The knocking continued, growing firmer, angrier. Evan, you're not supposed to ignore me, the voice said, sounding less like her with every word. You know the rules. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the screen in the town square displayed a new message. Rule update issued last night. One resident failed to comply. No name was mentioned. At breakfast, I noticed the house across the street was empty. Curtains gone, door slightly open, no sign that anyone had ever lived there. I asked my neighbor Tom about it. He frowned. There was a family there yesterday, he said slowly. Wasn't there? Neither of us said anything else. Over the next few days, the rules grew stranger. Rule 7. Do not look directly at the sun between 12 and 12:05 p.m. Rule 9. If you see someone standing still in the road, wait for them to move first. Do not approach. Rule 10. If you hear the bell ring outside scheduled hours, lie flat on the floor and cover your ears. People started disappearing. Not dramatically. No screams, no blood, just absence. A chair left pulled out, a cup half full, a house that no one remembered being occupied. Worse than that was how quickly the rest of us forgot them. I would feel a hole in my memory, like a missing tooth I couldn't stop probing with my tongue. I knew something was gone, but I couldn't remember what. One afternoon, I broke another rule. I wandered too close to the forest edge. There was no fence, no sign, just a sudden pressure in the air, like stepping into deep water. The trees were wrong, their trunks twisted inward, bending towards something unseen. I heard whispers, not voices exactly, more like thoughts brushing against my mind. Go back, something urged, before they notice. I ran. That night, a new page appeared in my rules document. I hadn't put it there. Rule 13. Curiosity accelerates correction. My name was written beneath it. That was when I understood. Red Hollow hadn't been relocated to protect us. We had been moved to contain something. And whatever it was learning us. By the end of the week, the bell rang at 2:17 a.m. I remembered Rule 10 just in time, dropping to the floor as the sound drilled into my skull. Beneath the bell, I heard screaming. Not from outside, from under the house. By the second week, New Hollow no longer felt like a place we were forced to live in. It felt like a place that was slowly digesting us. The bell that woke me at 6 a.m. each day had become part of my dreams. Sometimes I heard it before it rang. Sometimes it rang only in my head. I learned not to trust my senses anymore. The rules warned us about that too, though they never said it directly. Tom stopped coming outside. At first I assumed he was sick. Then 3 days passed, and his porch light never turned on again. On the fourth day, his house looked different. The paint was fresher, the mailbox stood straighter. It was as if the house had never been lived in at all. When I tried to remember Tom's face, my mind slid away from it like water off glass. That terrified me more than his disappearance. The screen in the town square updated daily now, sometimes hourly. The messages were short and cheerful, written in the same friendly font as grocery store sales signs. Thank you for your cooperation. Stability improving. Anomalies reduced. Anomalies. That's what we were now. I started writing things down. Names, faces, conversations. Anything I feared might vanish from my memory. I hid the notebook under a loose floorboard in my bedroom. Every night before curfew, I reread it to remind myself that these people had existed. One night, I found a name written there that I did not recognize. Sarah Elwood, age 9, lived 2 houses down, loved chalk drawings. I stared at the page, my chest tightening. The next morning, I walked past the Elwood house. It wasn't there, not abandoned, not empty, gone. The street curved where it never had before, houses neatly filling the space as if the Elwoods had never been part of the town's design. I felt something snap inside me. That afternoon, Coordinator Hale came to my door. He didn't knock. He waited until I opened it, as if he already knew I was standing there. You're adapting well, he said, smiling. That's encouraging. I asked him what was happening to us. He sighed like a man disappointed by a predictable question. New Hollow exists to maintain equilibrium, he said. Your old town sat above a convergence point, a thin place. Something below began pushing upward. My throat went dry. So you moved us, I said, to study it, to feed it, he corrected gently. He saw my expression and raised his hands. Feed is an unfortunate word. Think of it as regulation, pattern reinforcement. Human behavior is remarkably effective at stabilizing certain forces when properly guided. I asked what happened to people who disappeared. Hale's smile faded just a little. They were reassigned. Where? He leaned closer. You don't actually want to know that. That night, the knocking returned. This time, it wasn't my sister's voice. It was mine. Evan, the voice whispered. I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing. I lay frozen on the floor, staring at the door as the handle slowly turned, just a fraction, before snapping back into place. The rules updated again. Rule 15. Do not respond to versions of yourself. They are incomplete. I began to notice them during the day. People who looked almost right. A woman standing at the bus stop who blinked too slowly. A man mowing his lawn whose shadow lagged a second behind his movements. Children who played games with rules they never explained, stopping suddenly to stare at me with knowing smiles. Once I caught my reflection in a window and watched it continue smiling after my face had gone still. The hum beneath the ground grew louder. It pulsed at night, syncing with my heartbeat. Sometimes I felt it through my feet, like something shifting in its sleep beneath the town. I dreamed of roots growing upward, cracking foundations, searching for warmth. Then came the underground sirens. They weren't mentioned in the rules. A low rising wail echoed from below the streets, followed by an announcement on every screen. Partial breach detected. Residents remain calm. Correction in progress. The air smelled wrong afterward. Metallic. Wet. The next morning, several houses were missing. Not destroyed, not damaged, removed. No one spoke about it. Not even in whispers. The forgetting was happening faster now. I felt it nibbling at my thoughts, erasing details, smoothing edges. I went back to the forest. I didn't plan to. My feet just carried me there, like something was pulling me. The pressure hit me again, heavier this time, but I pushed through it. The trees leaned inward, their bark split with dark veins. The whispers returned, louder, clearer. We were here first, they murmured. Your rules hurt us. I saw shapes moving between the trunks. Not bodies, not quite shadows. They folded and unfolded like thoughts trying to become solid. This place was never meant for you, one voice said, sounding almost kind. They're using you to seal us away. I asked what would happen if the rules failed. The forest went silent. Then together, the voices answered. We will remember everything. That night, I made a decision. I would break the rules on purpose. At 9:01 p.m., I stepped outside. The darkness pressed down instantly. The streetlights flickered, struggling. I heard movement everywhere, like the town had been waiting for me. The bell began to ring. Not the normal bell. This one screamed. I stayed standing. Something rose from the ground at the center of the street. Not bursting through, but phasing upward, like a thought surfacing from sleep. It looked like a human shape stretched too thin, its features rearranging themselves over and over. It spoke without a mouth. Compliance failure detected, it said. Correction required. I felt hands grab my arms, not physical hands, memories, faces, forgotten people pressing into me, anchoring me in place. I screamed my own name. The thing recoiled. For a moment, the hum stopped. Every screen in town went black. Then one message appeared, flashing red. Major breach. Phase 2 initiated. I woke up on my floor at dawn. The town was still there, but now I knew the truth. New Hollow wasn't just watching us anymore. It was afraid. And whatever was beneath us was waking up. After Phase 2 was initiated, the rules stopped pretending to protect us. They became desperate. The bell no longer rang at fixed times. Sometimes it screamed for hours. Sometimes it didn't ring at all, and that silence was worse. Screens flickered with half-finished sentences. Words rearranged themselves while we watched, as if the system couldn't decide what warnings mattered anymore. Stay indoors. No, go outside. Do not listen. Listen carefully. People began to panic. Real panic this time. Not the quiet fear we had learned to swallow. I saw neighbors arguing in the streets before curfew, shouting names they barely remembered. Some clutched rule documents thick as books now, pages stapled and taped together, filled with contradictions. I checked my notebook. Most of the names were gone, not erased. The ink was still there, but my mind refused to connect meaning to the letters. I knew they were important. I just couldn't remember why. Only one name still hurt when I read it. Sarah Elwood. The underground hum had turned into something like breathing. Slow. Massive. The ground rose and fell ever so slightly beneath my feet, enough that I could feel it if I stood still. Cracks appeared in sidewalks, sealing themselves shut moments later, as if the town itself was healing. Or resisting. Coordinator Hale appeared on the screen that afternoon. His image glitched, stretching vertically, then snapping back into place. Residents of New Hollow, he said, voice strained. We are experiencing an unexpected destabilization. Your continued cooperation is critical. Someone threw a rock at the screen. The screen bled. A dark fluid leaked from the cracks, evaporating before it hit the ground. The image of Hale smiled wider. We remind you, he continued, that the rules are for your own good. That night, there was no curfew announcement. At 11 p.m., people were still outside. At midnight, the forest moved. I don't mean the trees swaying or branches bending. The tree line stepped forward. Roots tore free from the soil, dragging entire trunks with them. The pressure field vanished, replaced by a wave of cold that rolled through town, frosting windows and stiffening breath in our lungs. The whispers became voices. They poured into New Hollow from every direction, filling the air with memory and hunger. We remember, they said. You tried to make us forget. Figures emerged from the ground then. Not the stretched, incomplete things we'd seen before, but fuller shapes. Faces made of layered expressions. Bodies stitched together from borrowed proportions. They looked like people the way a dream looks like reality until you wake up. Some of them wore familiar faces. Tom stood in the street across from me, whole and solid, but wrong in the eyes. Behind him was Mrs. Ketterson, holding a leash that trailed off into nothing. You left us, Tom said calmly. I didn't, I whispered. You were taken. He smiled sadly. That's what they wanted you to think. The town speakers blared to life, screaming overlapping rules. Do not engage. Engage immediately. Remember who you are. Forget faster. The ground split open near the town square. What rose from it was not a creature. It was a space, a hollow in reality shaped like something immense had once been there and was now pushing back. Buildings bent toward it. Light curved. Sound stretched and distorted. Words drawn out into moans. This was the convergence point Hale had talked about. And we were standing on its lid. The forest entities moved toward the opening, drawn like iron filings to a magnet. The government constructs rushed to intercept them, forming rigid shapes of rules and authority, their bodies flickering with text and symbols. When they collided, the air screamed. Rules burned. I felt something tear at my thoughts, trying to pull me apart into usable pieces. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, and screamed every name I could remember, every face I had loved, every moment that still felt real. The hollow reacted. It pulsed. The underground breathing turned into a roar. Hale's voice cut through the chaos, suddenly right behind me. You're making it worse, he said, grabbing my shoulder. Identity strengthens them. I twisted free. You're feeding it, people. He shook his head wildly. We're feeding it order. Without us, it consumes everything. The hollow expanded. I saw inside it then. Red hollow. Not as it had been, but as it truly was. The land beneath it had always been thin, always hungry. The town had grown like mold on a wound, and people had lived their lives never knowing what listened beneath their feet. The government hadn't created the problem. They had just tried to manage it. Poorly. The forest entities surged forward, pouring themselves into the hollow, not to escape it, but to fill it. They were memories, I realized. Forgotten lives, erased patterns, everything New Hollow had taken from us. The rules shattered, screens exploded, documents turned to ash. The constructs screamed as their words peeled off them, leaving nothing solid behind. Hale fell to his knees. We were so close, he whispered. The hollow collapsed inward with a sound like a door finally closing. When the light returned, New Hollow was gone. I woke up lying in tall grass under an open sky. No bell, no hum, just wind. Around me, people stirred, confused and dazed. The land was empty, untouched. No houses, no roads, no forest pressing in. Red Hollow was gone, too. The town had been erased completely, folded into the hollow and sealed away with everything that had been taken. We were survivors without a place. Government vehicles arrived hours later. Different uniforms this time, different faces. They asked questions we couldn't answer properly, took notes, loaded us into buses again. This time, the windows were clear. As we drove away, I saw a sign planted into the ground behind us. Undevelopable land. Do not settle. I still hear the hum sometimes when the world is quiet. Still feel the ground breathe. Whatever was beneath us is sleeping again. But now it remembers us. And I know one thing for certain. If the government ever tells you they're relocating your town for your safety, don't ask about the rules. Ask what's buried underneath.